Music producers, audio engineers, mixers, stick around because this one's for you. Austin Sublett is here, and he is breaking down his mastering process for my new song, Burner. And let me tell you, he really brings it. He covers plugins, his process, and his philosophy for why he's making the decisions he's making. And he even shares a couple of his secrets for taking a mix and really pushing it to that next level. I learned a ton just editing this, and I think there's gonna be a lot in here for you. And be sure to stick around for the end because he does something really interesting with the automation that kind of surprised me, and I'm curious what you might think of it. Be sure to let me know in the comments. Now, if you haven't heard Burner before, you can listen here on YouTube, or you can check the description below for links to Spotify and Apple Music. And if you like the song, maybe just throw me a little like and subscribe. It's just an idea. Even if you have heard it before, give it a fresh spin and then get comfy, because Austin and his soothing voice are about to take us through the entire process for how he mastered the song Burner by me, Dan the Voyager. Check it out.
Hey everyone, my name is Austin Sublett. I am a mix and master engineer, and I mastered this song Burner by Dan the Voyager. And so today I'm just going to go through my step-by-step process and talk a little bit about what I was hearing and what caused me to make some choices for the master. And the first thing I was hearing was that there was a lot of really cool little ear candy in there, little synths and vocoders and little stereo information that I thought was super cool. However, I felt like it was being covered up a little bit. I do want to say that this mix is really good. I really liked working on the master for this because everything was already really balanced, and you could really hear the direction that everything was meaning to go. I just felt like there's almost like this slight blanket on it that I just wanted to kind of uncover all those juicy little ear candy bits and details. I know I wanted to uncover that. I know I wanted to make it sound bigger. The first thing is I wanted to do some clipping. This is a free clipper. Sometimes you can go pretty extreme before you hear any audio difference. And the idea for me is to not hear any audio difference. It's just shaving off the ultra quick transients and just the tips of them. So that way when you're hitting your limiter, that limiter is not being pumped as hard, and it means you can push more into the limiter and get more loudness out of it and get more of whatever character you're going for without the level being brought down so dramatically with these like extreme peaks. So you can see I'm very subtly clipping. Next step is fresh air. Again, whenever I was listening, it sounded like there was almost a blanket on the mix a little bit, and I just wanted to uncover that. This just added a little bit of brightness, and I'm barely pushing this. 10% in this high air band, and then 6% in this. So you can hear... I can particularly hear it on the hi-hats when it's going tss. It's already giving a little bit more width, which I really like. So it just added a little bit of lift to it and brightened it up. The next step, I wanted to warm up the low end a bit. So I really like this plugin. It's called Plasma. It's a dynamic saturator. So rather than putting a flat saturation on it and setting it at a level, this reacts to the music and helps fill in some gaps. And I really like what this is doing. I started with doing a EDM hype. That's a preset that it is. It's just not affecting the high end on this saturation. So it's only getting kind of this lower mid-range and low end. Here's it back on. You can really hear in that like bass and in the kick drum, it's just adding some depth and warmth to it. Having that little bit of brightness, especially it's hitting these stereo elements and then filling out that rich low end, is really just like opening this up and adding more depth and dimension to it, which I really like the sound of. If you don't have like a good listening environment, you might not notice it as much, but it's really just adding that little bit of oomph in the foundation of the mix, which I really like. Next is I'm using this plugin that I really like called IDX Intelligent Dynamics. It's one of those magic plugins that they don't tell you exactly what it's doing. But essentially, what I've gathered is it's kind of like a multi-band compressor, but instead of setting maybe 3 bands or 4 groups, it's acting on each individual frequency, or at least a much smaller slice of frequency ranges. And it's probably got some saturation and excitement and different things built in. But you can see I'm not even pushing it all that hard. Minus 16.3, it maxes out at minus 48. You can tilt it one way or the other, so you can make it to where it's really kind of brightening it more or darkening it more. I just left it in the middle so you can hear what it does. I'll turn it off and then I'll turn it on. On. Off. What I'm hearing is it's taking care of some of those boxier mid-range frequencies where it was kind of heavy, and it's compressing some of those down. So it's just helping balance it out. Next, I monoed the low end, so up to 50 hertz. So everything about 50 hertz and below is mono. So basically all I've done is I took this FabFilter Pro Q3, and I'm only affecting the sides. So it's rolling off everything under 50 hertz from the sides. A lot of synths end up having a lot of low end information that you just don't need, and it'll just muddy up the mix. And what this will do is help the low end of the kick and bass just kind of be a punchy middle foundation and not muddy up those like sub frequencies. And then I determined that it needed a little bit of brightness. I'm not even hitting a dB here, only on the sides. And what that's doing is make it seem a little more stereo and wide. Next, this was response to us determining that the lead vocal needed to be brought out a little more. So all I've done is around 2700, brought up only the mid channel, and I'm right at a dB hitting this. And then I think at one point, even though I boosted 3/4 of a dB, we determined that it did end up getting a little bright down the road. So I've actually just pulled this down about half a dB. Typically, if I've added an EQ and then compression or saturation or something, it's not always going to respond the same if I change the EQ that was before those plugins versus after. So I just go in order of what I'm hearing. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. In this case, I definitely could have gone back and just brought down, half a dB on that high shelf. But I just went ahead and plopped it on here. So, sue me. Next thing I did was I wanted to play with the stereo imaging a bit. Rather than only volume dynamics, so things get quieter and things get louder, I also look at width dynamics, so some sections being narrower, some sections being wider. I also want to look at EQ dynamics, so things being darker versus brighter. So I'll show it in a bit, but that fresh air that's adding some brightness, and that EQ that's adding that high shelf, so I'm automating them off, being bypassed in those 2 main transition sections before the second and last big chorus. So the section before it will sound a little darker. And then once it's a chorus, it's just a little bit brighter. And it's kind of a subtle move, but you can really tell the difference when it's not on. The other thing I do is adjust the stereo width. So here you will see these bands getting automated, making it a little narrower, so a little more mono, and then when the chorus kicks in, they're going to jump up and make it a little wider. Next, I wanted to address some of the harshness, so I put an instance of Soothe on. It's mostly reacting to some of those harsher vocoder frequencies. Next thing I did is where I kind of went a little overboard, but I really like doing this. I almost always do some kind of match EQ. On this match EQ, I am only matching everything from under 301 hertz. So I'm just looking at the low end. and I'm matching it to some industry standard song that has really great low end. You can see though, even this highest move that it's making, this is still like barely at or over 2 decibels. So these aren't like giant moves. They're fairly subtle. Even these, we're at between 1 and 2 decibels of movement at the most extreme. Some of these are more subtle. It looks extreme because it's really zoomed in, but I like doing that just to check. So again, if I was mixing this, I wouldn't leave this on. I would go to the mix and see, okay, on my low end, maybe I'm boosting too much around 200 hertz. So I'll go to the bass or whatever instrument is in those areas and maybe do some adjustments in the mix. But in the mastering stage, I don't have that option. So I will leave this on just to match that a little bit. And again, I'm only blending that at 50%. So it's subtle, but just to push it a little more towards what that industry standard is, because that's what our ears are used to. And then the second match EQ I did was the opposite. I used a different mix and did everything above what we just did and checked a different mix that we really liked the mid-range and high end on, basically everything except for the low end. So you can kind of get best of both worlds. And it's the same thing. And you can see again, this is not really hitting more than a decibel or two in any direction. So it's subtle. We're not trying to totally just change this mix. We just want to push it and balance it a little more. So I've got the smoothing at 30%, and I'm only doing 32% on this. I think as I pushed it up more, it just started making it too harsh. So next, we determined that we wanted to, or at least I determined I wanted to balance out the top end a little more. Because what I was hearing is just some of that stereo information as I brightened it up, just had stuff that was poking out a little bit. So I'm going a little more extreme on there, but it's not affecting that middle vocal because we wanted to keep that pretty clear. So I didn't want to affect the dynamics on that too much. So next, this is the last step I always do before the final limiter is I do one more master mix EQ, EQ match. It's just smooth out some of those like masking frequencies that were just making it a little muddy, a little boxy, and you can really hear that like more boxy mid-range that again I didn't catch earlier. And again, I'm only doing 19%, so I'm like barely pushing into this. It just instantly is like smooth master to me after all that. The final step is the final limiter. And luckily, everything we had done up to this point, the clipping, the saturation, the multiband compression, everything, the soothing, kept things pretty manageable where I didn't have to push too much into the limiter and like squash the mix. So it's hitting roughly like 2 dB at the most, 2.5 dB at the most on gain reduction. So it's not like absolutely crushing this mix. That's just to bring it up to like final level and balance it out dynamics wise. The last thing I want to talk about is some of the other automations that I did. So right here, all at the beginning, is it's actually reduced by 2 dB. So this is the master fader after the full mastering chain. That can be kind of common in some pop music where if you keep it a little quieter at the beginning, people tend to turn their volume up. And then when the big part comes in, it sounds huge. And it's just like a little psychological thing that I thought was kind of cool, but you can't be too extreme with it because then it'll be really obvious. You know, it's just this like the synth and the vocal at the beginning. And then that kick comes in and the stereo vocals come in. Still kind of flat dynamically, so I wanted to just accent that a little bit. And it's only 1 decibel move, but it makes a difference.
Static, no growth, it's automatic. When does a habit become a good reason to go stop?
So it's just kind of stair stepping up, and then you can see here, the beginning of this section, it starts off at minus 0.5 decibels, and all the way till this section, it's subtly over that very long period of time lowered volume by 0.5 decibel. And when you do it really slow like that, a listener's not going to notice. And then even then at the very end, because without this automation, this little synth transition here was actually pretty loud. So I did a pretty drastic roll off down to -3 dB before the drop comes in. But then at the chorus, for the first time, it's all the way up to 0 dB. And in combination with the stereo width trick I did, plus the EQ trick where we're taking out some of the brightness in that section, those 3 automation moves really make that transition punch once the chorus comes in.
Burner, so you don't know where I've been.
Here it rolls off. So it's just really subtle, and then at the end, it's a little more extreme for a fraction of a second, and then that lifts back up for the loudest it's been in the song so far, and it just added that extra oomph when you start it off 2 decibels quieter. Most people can't tell a giant difference between those two, especially when it's over a period of time, but it's those subtle moves that make a lot of a difference, in my opinion. And then at the end, you see on this section, I did the same thing. It was at 0 dB, and I only dropped it a dB here for this transition because by then the song's already come up here, and I don't want to bring it back down 2 decibels because it'll be too obvious. Then this is just to kind of balance it out at the end, so it slowly kind of fades out. But again, it's very subtle. You don't even really notice it. So then I'll show you, this is just where I've bypassed the fresh air. Here's one of the bands on the imager that it's making it more mono as it goes down and then lifting it up even more stereo in the chorus. Yeah, so again, my name is Austin Sublett. This is just my crazy thought process on how I approach mastering this song, Burner. It's a super awesome song. Please go check it out when it releases, and stay tuned because I know he's going to be releasing music monthly. So everything he's put out already is absolute top tier quality, and I'm so excited to work on more of his music. So thanks for watching this video, and stream Burner everywhere.
Hey, I'm back just real quick to say thank you to Austin for doing this. Really love that he gave up his time and energy to make this. Hope you are too. And if you want to hire him, check the comments. I'll pin it at the top. I'll have a link to where you can go and hire him for producing, for mastering, for mixing, the whole thing. And you really should. He's really, really good. And hey, if you like this video or the song, please consider subscribing to some of my artist pages, my YouTube channel. Maybe share it with somebody that you know likes this kind of music. Any kind of support like that is just so invaluable, and I'd really, really appreciate it. Thanks.